Everybody wants to break into tech and break into cybersecurity. If you are passionate about the field, about your work, this is not a 9-to-5 job. Even if you're on your job 9 to 5, you're upskilling, you're constantly learning. This is a commitment, okay? And they're not paying you for that continuous learning. The job descriptions are unrealistic. They influence the fact that they have a lot of responsibility but don't have the power that they need. And I sat there reading that, Femi. I sat there thinking, this isn't only at the CISO level. This is happening on the way down. One of the biggest barriers I feel is access. And it's access at many levels. Many levels. Yeah. And I think I had this experience once. And I really thought, Femi, that I had started to break that access barrier at some point. And this is really personal. I went to this event and I will tell you, I think I was the only woman of color there. I was hardly recognized. I cried on the way home. I couldn't believe it. Not because I felt treated badly per se, but more like, my God, when am I going to break this access barrier?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Migrant podcast. And today I'm going to be doing something interesting. As you all know, it's March. March is, I'd like to call it International Women's Month, not just day. And I think we should celebrate women, particularly in tech, because tech is a very heavily male-dominated field. So every time I see a woman who's doing stuff in tech, I think we should celebrate that. My guest today is somebody who has got a ton of experience in technology and cybersecurity. She's done stuff working with cross-functional collaborative teams. She's mentored and coached several people. She, like myself, is a visible minority, which is one of the reasons why I'm so impressed by what she's done. She's led teams. She's spearheaded global cybersecurity initiatives. She's also the host of the fabulously named Bites, Bits, and Brilliance Career Insight and Inspiration podcast, where she talks about mentorship. She bridges the gap for underrepresented groups in tech and cybersecurity. And she has a ton of certifications to her name as well. So she's specialized in cybersecurity risk management, stakeholder management, mentoring, cross-functional project management. You know what? She's the whole 9 years. She's the real deal.
A lot of stuff.
My guest today is Dawn Butler. Dawn, welcome to the Cybersecurity Migrant podcast.
Thank you so much. What an introduction. Thank you. And you're right. It's a lot of stuff.
It is what we do. Sometimes we just have to do all the stuff we want to do, how we can do it there. But again, I'm going to try to keep this fun. Again, I know the audience is going to be looking forward to hear all about this. So we're going to get into that. But first, if you're new here, welcome to the Cybersecurity Migrant podcast. It's a channel for people who are building careers in tech and in cybersecurity, especially people who are immigrants or minorities. And if you've been visiting the channel before, you've seen our content before, thank you for coming back again to watch another video. But if you're new to the channel, here's what we do here. So every month, we're bringing you real conversations on the Cybersecurity Migrant podcast, and also on the sister podcast, the Cybersecurity Migrant Lounge. We bring in broader tech conversations talking about practical career growth, up to content, security, privacy, AI, tech, product management, everything to do with technology. So if you care about careers, technology, protecting your future, hit subscribe and check out the playlist and share this with someone who needs it. And now let's get into today's video. Once again, Dawn, welcome to the Cybersecurity Migrant.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to start at the very beginning. What drew you into technology and specifically cybersecurity? Did you just wake up and decide, you know what, I'm going to do cyber for fun?
No, not at all. If we really want to go back to the beginning, I wanted to be a teacher when I was a child. I just feel like most kids, like girls, want to be teachers because it's almost like your first representation or model of a professional in your life. And a lot of teachers are women. And around the 9th grade, I started looking around the classroom and I was just like, these kids are bad. I don't want to teach them. And I said, they're only going to get worse. I know. So somehow I got this idea I wanted to be a doctor. And that lasted for a couple of years. And then I talked myself out of that. I won't go into the story about that. And it was time to go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I remember very vividly driving in the car with my mother, and it was time for me to select a major. I think I had even gotten into college by then, I can't remember. And I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I do know that I don't want to do certain things. And at the time, I don't know if you mentioned, I'm from the Bahamas and born and raised there. Yeah, so I said to her, I knew at the time, this was in the early 90s. In our country, people who were successful were doctors, lawyers.
Yeah.
And then in my family, my father and all of his brothers were accountants. And I didn't want to do that. I just knew I just wanted to be different.
Okay.
And my mom said to me, why don't you become an engineer? And I didn't even know what that was, Femi. I didn't. I was like, what is that? I mean, back in those days, we didn't have the internet. You had an encyclopedia. True. You didn't read it all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You thumb through it.
Yeah, you were exposed to what you were exposed to. And she said, they're the people that build the roads. And I said, okay. And I applied to school, got in and registered to be a civil engineer, like civil engineering.
Okay.
And in my first semester, I was just like, I don't want to do this. I didn't.
It happened quickly.
It did.
After 4 years.
But I still wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
And I wanted to leave the school where I was. And I went to see my counselor or whatever and my advisor, and they were like, are you sure? You should go see the assistant dean of the School of Engineering. And I'm like, the assistant dean? Oh my God, like I'm intimidated. And people don't believe this, but I'm a pretty shy person, not as much anymore, but back then, very, very shy. And but in any case, he was really nice. He was like, aren't you on a scholarship? And I was on a full scholarship. He's like, do you think where you want to go, you're going to get the money? And I was like, probably not. He was like, why don't you just switch your major to electrical engineering? It's a great foundation to go into something else.
Okay.
And I took his advice, and that's what I did.
Okay.
So no cybersecurity anything. Plus, it didn't exist as cybersecurity back then.
Yes, it didn't exist, no.
People were computer science majors and stuff like that. When it came to
it wasn't very fun at the time. It wasn't fun.
Yeah. And then I left college and I didn't have a job, and I'm on that visa, that student visa that gives you a year to like train, right? And it's counting down. And one of my best buddies he got me my first job, and it was as a programmer. Well, I say he got me. He referred me and I got the job, and that was the history. That's how I got into IT.
And the rest is history, like they say.
Yeah, and then eventually, about 10 years in, I moved into cybersecurity. And so that's how that happened. Yeah.
So I think if you look at most people who are in cyber today, we're not the typical person you would see. My degree is in chemistry. I've got a second degree in pharmaceutical chemistry, but here I am doing cybersecurity stuff. So there's always a journey where we go everywhere and sort of just end up in cyber because it's kind of like what we love doing, we find. But for you, would you say there was a moment where you realized that, you know what, there's a talent gap, there's a mentorship gap, and I want to fill that gap in my own way at some point?
I realized it right around the time I started my podcast. And I joined a lot of social media groups like Women in Tech, Black Women in Tech, Black in Tech, and stuff like that. And I just saw so many people asking for mentors. And, people would say, oh, you don't just ask somebody to be your mentor. It doesn't happen like that. It should be organic. And it was a lot of different people, people have a lot of different experiences with mentorship. And at the time, I myself knew I had struggled with finding mentors. And I talk about this on the podcast for National Mentoring Month, sort of my misconceptions about mentorship and things like that. But at that point in time, in 2024, I had really good mentors I would say probably the first time in my life.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, what if I could like tap these people that I work with and they can share their experiences? Because I'm almost 30 years into my career. Most of them are too, and they are similar to me. They didn't start in cybersecurity. They meandered along the way, Yeah. A podcast came into my mind. Initially, I was like, what? I don't want to do this. But I was just so driven by this gap that I saw and the fact that I understood what it was like not to have good mentorship. Right? Yeah, whether it was in a micro sense or whatever. Okay. And understanding what it was like not to have it and then to have it, but to have it at such a, I wouldn't say late stage in my career, but we're looking at almost 30 years in to finally feel like I had support from a mentorship perspective. And so that's when I realized like this gap, and I had this really desire to fill it for other people. And I also started I had been reading about like the cyber skills gap, the cyber workforce gap, but even at work, it was just like, how do we get people into this profession? And the interesting thing for me was I would sit in those town halls where they would talk about recruiting people. And I would sit there thinking, but what about the folks that are already here? They need something too. And so when I started my podcast, it was very specifically about retention, not necessarily about bringing people in. It was like, how do we keep the people that are here? And then most specifically, women, because women leave our profession in droves, right? And so those are some of my drivers, but it's evolved over the last 2 seasons. But those are like my core drivers, like underrepresented people. And when I started the podcast, I wanted people of color to see people of color.
Exactly.
Right?
So important. I think it's so important.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, if you see people who look like you, then it then makes it that, okay, you know what, that means I can actually do this too, as opposed to there's no one who looks like me there. And I've had this conversation with some people here in my local area, and I've said to people, yes, we keep on saying we're all inclusive, but can you show me how many people in your leadership team are minorities or women?
Absolutely.
And I'm like, you talk about the diversity, but it's not there. So are you just paying lip service? And I think that's something that we can't just throw in the towel and give up now. We've got to keep working at it because we've got to make that change. Just leaving that aside for a minute. Let's come and talk a bit about that skill gap. Yes, there's a skill gap, but there's also a retention problem. What would you say is the one thing that many people in HR, who by the way don't know a lot about cyber, unfortunately, what do they get wrong about talent pipelines? It's an entry-level role and you're asking for CISSP or CISM or whatever it is. It's sometimes stupid. But again, what are they getting wrong, and how can we as professionals help them to correct?
It's so multifaceted, Femi, in my opinion.
I know.
So I came across a post on LinkedIn just like yesterday. This gentleman had written about how CISOs, and so for the people who may not know, that's a Chief Information Security Officer. These are the top leaders in cybersecurity, are not taking CISO jobs.
Exactly.
And I wasn't surprised by that because I had come across a job board in the last few months where there were so many open CISO roles. I was in shock because at one time you couldn't find that many.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I was really looking, but there weren't that many available. And I was like, oh, this means something. This is a signal, right? And he wrote about like how the job descriptions are unrealistic, they influence the fact that they have a lot of responsibility but don't have the power that they need. And I sat there reading that, Femi, and I talk about this on one of my episodes of my podcast. I can't remember which one it was, from last season. And I sat there thinking, this isn't only at the CISO level. This is happening on the way down. Yeah. I came across a job description the other day I can't remember what the role was. There were at least 3 roles listed in that JD.
For one person to do.
Yeah. And I'm reading it, and Femi, I didn't read it in full. I skimmed it. Yeah. And I was just like, this is 3 roles. And the salary, oh my gosh. And so I just said, you know what?
Flat.
So that's a part of it. I don't know if that's a symptom of the market right now. There's definitely a disconnect, I think, between like HR, recruiters, and managers. Maybe even it's a budget thing. Maybe there is a cybersecurity hiring manager out there that wants this person and they're not allowed to hire them because of money or something. I don't know. I'm sure there's all kinds of reasons. And so when you think about it, if this is happening at the chief role, why are we surprised it's happening at the entry level?
That's true.
It's happening in middle management or in the middle tier. Of course it's going to happen there. And I can't remember I think I saw something else and I was just like, it's very interesting, our profession. Oh, I'm doing this AI security training right now. And it was talking about the complexity of AI and how we need to use almost everything in our arsenal to defend. And I thought, wow. So our jobs are already pretty complex. Most cyber professionals are touching multiple subject matter and domains in their job. If you're a governance professional, you're still got to know about a bunch of different stuff, right? If you're a security architect, you still have to know a bunch of other stuff. You can't just know your thing.
Yeah, true. It's all connected.
Now, with AI coming in, it means that all of us have to now know even more, right? And so what does that mean for us?
Much more work, much more stress.
Will the pay follow? Probably not, because, they think that AI should do it.
Unfortunately, that's the thing. The pay doesn't match the job
description. It doesn't match the sacrifice you make. And I think, the sort of quandary I feel that I'm in, especially in my podcast, because I've really started to tell the truth. I say on my podcast, I'm not going to gatekeep, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat. I think you should know what you're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody wants to break into tech and break into cybersecurity. I want you to understand that if you are passionate about the field, about your work, this is not a 9-to-5 job or 8-to-4.
It's not. It's
because even if you're on your job 9-to-5, you're upskilling, you're constantly learning. This is a commitment, okay? And they're not paying you for that continuous learning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the burnout is real, all of those things like that.
Completely agree with it. Totally agree.
I think you heard my passion coming out.
Well, I think we need that passion, right? That's what, yes, many people get into the field of cybersecurity because they hear it's a 6-figure role. Yes, many roles are 6-figure, but many roles are not. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago. You wouldn't start out as a SOC analyst with a 6-figure role. That's just not possible. Disabuse your mind from that right now. No SOC analyst earns 6 figures to start. But again, it can be possible to get to 6 figures, but you're going to have to put in the work. It's a lot of work. Days, nights, weekends. Sometimes you lose family time because you've got to do work, and it has to be done. So it's not an easy, like you already said, we can't sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's easy money. No, there's no easy money in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
That's it. But let's just come back a bit and talk a bit about the technology we work with, teams and the resilience in teams. I find that these days what's happening is you find that last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, it was Amazon laying off 15,000 workers. Everyone is laying off people. They're not hiring more people. The workload hasn't reduced. So which means that there's less people to do more work. Or to do the same work, which effectively means more work for most people. So how do teams then build resilience? Because again, the company doesn't care. The work has to be done. So how do teams build resilience, and how can diversity help strengthen posture, culture, resilience in those teams?
I would say, and I'm going to try to think before I talk, because I tend to think out loud.
Unfiltered, done unfiltered is what we want.
I think out loud. I've been in that position, and I think 2 things happen. One, that person, whoever is laid off, no one does their job until we realize, oh my God, that needs to be done, right? Or you're right. Someone else or other people end up taking it on, and you just keep on pushing through. That's just what it is. And when it comes to resilience, I'm going to be very transparent and say that I didn't always do that well. And when I say resilience, I mean taking care of yourself, prioritizing the self-care, the things that were going to help you thrive, which is another part of why I started my podcast. It's like, if I can help that person coming up not do the things I did,
then that's a win. That's a win.
That's a win, right? And it takes a lot of courage. Okay, I interviewed one of my mentees for my podcast. The episode hasn't come out yet, but I met her when she first started her career. She was one of the first people to call me a mentor, and I was just like, a what? Because I was just being me.
Say what?
I was like, I'm your what? We laugh about it. And you know what she said to me, Femi, and I was so proud of her. She said she had an interview, and I hope she doesn't mind repeating this. Well, it'll be on the podcast. And she told them she needs her lunch break because she goes to the gym and this stuff. And that was a part of her requirement to be in that job. And I was just like, impressive. You did? She said, yes, because that's how I'm going to show up well. That's how I'm going to be the best that I can be. And, she didn't get pushback.
True, which is good. And it's also very important, I think.
But here's the thing that she did. She started off there. See, the challenge for a lot of us, and I'm saying us because it includes me, is we have these bad habits, and then we want to change, right? We want to start taking care of ourselves, taking the lunch break, and everyone looking at you like, what are you doing? Like, you leaving work early? You have a lunch
early.
You don't, and it's like, I am allowed to take a lunch break. I mean, it comes with it. And so I think that's a big deal. I think for those of us coming up, the ones coming in, anyone who's shifting to a new position, start off with the good habits. You know, the self-care. When I say putting yourself first, I don't mean being selfish, just taking care of yourself. The good habits that keep your mind, you know, ripe and active, and your emotional stability, because the constant change that comes with the work that we do is going to have you. So you need some stability in some habits and things like that. So in the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, I started meditating in the day, in the mornings, just time for myself. I had prayer time. I just started creating rituals, and I found it so helpful to, like, you know, start my day or to keep me going. I'm not saying I've done it perfectly. I still don't a lot of times, but it's just the fact that you make it a part of your life and prioritize it. Yeah,
I think that's important. I think you can't go any wrong with that, because again, if you don't take care of yourself, no one will.
Then you get laid off by Amazon after 18-hour days,
and the work
whatever
still gets done, even if you're not there. So you owe yourself a duty to take the best care of yourself, because I said this somewhere once. I was like, you're there, you're not there, the work will go on. You know, that's the sad truth. So you owe yourself a duty to make sure that you're doing the best thing you can for yourself.
We're not saying slack off, by the way. That's all we're saying.
Of course.
Right.
Because if you're not there, the work is going to get done anyway. So you owe yourself a duty to be the best version of yourself, both on the job, but also off the job, you know. So meditate, you know, exercise, go to the gym, do yoga, pray, whatever it is that works for you. Because the company needs you to be in top shape. And to be in top shape, you need to take care of yourself. Self-care is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Cybersec Migrant listeners. If you're enjoying the show, help us spread the word. Share the Cybersec Migrant podcast with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. It's the best way to help others discover our awesome content and to join the conversation. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and any other place where you get your podcast, so you never miss an episode. And do hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps us keep bringing you more valuable content, insights, and stories, and all these tips from the world of cybersecurity. And thank you for tuning in. And now, let's get back to today's episode. I want to talk a bit more about, you know, us as underrepresented professionals in cybersecurity and in tech generally, because there's not many women in cybersecurity. There's not many women of color in cybersecurity. That's even way less, you know.
It's way less.
So there's a lot of underrepresented people in cybersecurity. One, what kind of barriers do you think people like us face? Both who are already in here trying to go up there, get into leadership roles, or those who are just trying to get in. What kind of barriers do we face? What does meaningful mentorship look like, and how can it help us surmount those barriers as well?
So one thing that I have learned is that what we really need is sponsorship.
Bingo.
That's it.
Did you watch my most recent video? Because that's what I said. Go on.
Because mentorship is great. I mean, mentorship is situational, you know, all those things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that person's going to vouch for you or whatever. I mean, sometimes it happens that way, but it's not really what it's about. One of the biggest barriers I feel is access, and it's access at many levels. Many levels. And I think I had this experience once, and I really thought, Femi, that I had started to like break that access barrier at some point. And this is really personal. And I went to a work event. Someone was retiring. And at work, I had not always been extremely outgoing. And so I was really working on like nurturing relationships more and trying to build my community at work and things like that. And I think I had done a pretty decent job by that point. And so I went to this event, and I will tell you, I think I was the only woman of color there. And well, not even pressure. I was hardly recognized, like I hardly acknowledged.
Wait, that makes it worse.
It was really bad. I left, and I cried on the way home. I couldn't believe it. Not from feeling not because like I felt treated badly per se, but more like, my God, when am I going to, what's the word I want, break this access barrier? Like, how is it even breakable?
It's a glass ceiling. Yep, you're in a box and you're just trying to break out of that box, and it's so hard.
Yeah, is it even breakable?
That's the it gives me all the time. Exactly, is it?
Obviously, I mean, you and I are here doing this because of that. You know what I mean? But that's why I said I think that the key is sponsorship. You gotta have someone who is going to help you with the access. Yeah. Because you're doing all the things, right? Because like I said, I was doing the things that I was told was supposed to work.
Yeah, all the networking, go to the events, post on LinkedIn, take all the certification.
Yeah, I mean, but I had the education. I mean, I was working with a lot of these people, some of these people remotely and stuff, so they knew who I was, but I was shocked. And the thing is, I didn't notice it initially, but then I just realized, wait a minute, nobody's really talking to me. That's
not good. I know exactly how you'd have felt, because I've been there before too, so I know. I've been there before too.
Yeah, and it happens when I go to just general events. And someone said, "Oh, Dawn, you shouldn't let that bother you." I said, why not?
Exactly. We shouldn't.
Why is all of the labor of the whatever it is on me?
Exactly.
Right? Because like you go in the room and you have to be the one to approach and do the thing.
Exactly. That's something we face a lot. So there's something you said earlier, which I completely agree with. I had a video a couple of weeks ago, well, no, it was last week, where I spoke about mentorship and sponsorship as being two different things that we need. People think they're the same thing, but they're not. The mentor is going to tell you, well, you want to do this is what you need to do, to get there. But the sponsor is going to be the one who's going to be, even when you're not in the room, it's going to say, yes, I have the right person for you for this role, and put your name in the hat for that. That's what we need.
Right.
We don't get a lot of that. What do you think as minorities, as women, as people of color, what do you think we can actually do to improve chances for sponsorship, mentorship, and sponsorship that's meaningful, not just, not just word of mouth. Oh, I'm going to be a sponsor, I'm going to help you, and then nothing happens, but meaningful sponsorship and mentorship. What can we do to improve all of that?
Absolutely, Fami, meaningful. Because I've had people say that to me and then there was nothing to it. Okay, so I don't know. We're looking at hundreds of years of institutional stuff. People don't even know they're doing this stuff.
Exactly.
It's so ingrained.
Reflex, which is a shame.
Okay. Anyway. If you tell them they're doing it, they're like, what do you mean? Why'd you pull the race card? I'm like, you think I want to pull the race card? You think that feels good for me? No.
That's true.
This is what I've started to say. And it's going to be a tough journey. We have to make our way to the C-suite in order to bring us up.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
And I don't know if we're doing that.
We can only try, but we're going to keep on trying.
I've heard that it's very challenging for Black people or people of color when they get up to the C-suite. It becomes even more difficult for them to maintain their position and things like that. And so it can be challenging for them to then bring up with them, right? And I can honor that. When I heard it, I was like, I feel that. I can see that. Like, whether it's because they may have people pulling on them or just trying to maintain their position. There's this, I keep forgetting what it's called. There's this thing there's a word for it that they do to women. They will put a woman into a leadership role, a CEO or whatever role, and
as a token.
The ship is sinking. Okay.
And then they want her to do magic.
And then surround her with a bunch of people who are not supporting her. And so I can imagine that for a lot of Black people in those positions that they might be in that position. You know what I mean? And that's why I said, I don't know if I have an answer. I don't know how we fix hundreds of years of whatever. I think we have to just continue to use all the tools in our toolbox, right? I think a lot of us are deciding to build business of our own as an option. I heard Halle Berry say that, on they interviewed her a few years back about, the Academy Awards and stuff. And she said, even when she got that, the doors still weren't opening for her. So she created her own thing. And I was just like, this is what we're doing.
If the door doesn't open, break the door down or build your own door.
Build your own table, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah. And I completely agree. I was speaking to somebody. He has his own startup right now. It's a startup that provides EMR software and security for, hospitals and clinics here in the Vancouver area. But he was in public sector once, and he was a leader at the time. And he was like, every time he was in any meeting, he could literally feel the target on his back as the only black person in the boardroom at that level. Because every time they see him, they're like, how did you get here? Because you shouldn't be here. You don't look like you should be here. You don't look like you deserve to be here.
Right.
So how are you here?
Right.
And the only way we can change that is if there's enough of us there.
Absolutely.
It doesn't look like an aberration anymore. Because right now, every time there's one person there, it looks like it doesn't belong. One of these things doesn't belong.
Absolutely.
Like this on the street.
But you know what's so sad about that? Speaking of the doesn't look like you belong, I go back to the whole, like, we do the labor. And which is why when I said the thing, like when you go into an event and you're the only one and you're sort of forced to be the one to approach and do all the things, it hit me. I'm like, but I'm not unnoticeable.
Exactly.
I'm standing out.
Or invisible.
And then someone like me, Femi, I tend to wear bright colors and, so I know you see me.
We love our colors. We love our colors.
I know you see me. So you actively unseeing me too.
True, which is, again, and I think that's the thing. So I like you rightly said, I don't think there's a magic wand or secret potion we can take that's going to cure everything. No, it's going to take a while. It's taken years to get here. It didn't happen overnight.
And now we're digressing, Femi.
Well,
as you said earlier, we weren't supposed to be going here. How'd we get here again?
Okay.
Well, because we're talking about underrepresentation, and the system is the cause of that.
True. Unfortunately, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It is. The system doesn't help. But I think also, ultimately, while the system doesn't help, it would be doing ourselves a disservice to say, well, the system is rigged against me, so I'm going to just, do my part.
But I'm not saying that.
And go. I agree. So,
Femi, again, you and I wouldn't be here doing this if we thought that.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I completely agree. So
I wouldn't be shouting into the void, or what seems like the void.
it's not
about
a void.
intentional,
it's not
about having, intentionally going into the pipeline and finding the people that are othered in all kinds of ways and developing them. I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't believe it could be possible. And then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 50 people might hear it and say, oh, that's a great idea.
Let's do the same thing. I completely agree. So on that thought, then, if you could go back to yourself 30 years ago and you stood before yourself and she was like, future Dawn, what should I do? What would you say? What advice would you give your younger self?
30 years ago, you said?
Or maybe 20. 20 years ago. But not last year, not 2 years ago, no. Because you were there already. So like, I want to, back when you were like, okay, now that I know better, I could have done these things differently. That's deep.
I don't know, because 20 years ago, I just was not as aware.
So what would you advise that unaware Dawn now? What would you say?
About 20 years ago, this was the first time I was managing people around that time. Not exactly 20, but in that span of a decade or so. I would definitely have asked for more. So I became a manager, but no one trained me, right? No one.
You're just thrown in. All right, go learn yourself.
Yeah, I would have. And then at the time, I was a working manager. And so that meant I was doing the work plus managing. And so I never really had space for development, from the leadership side of things. And so when I was done with that experience, I just thought maybe management wasn't for me, even though I always knew I wanted to lead people. I was already a leader in my extracurricular life, my personal life. I am. You
still are.
Yeah. Yeah. But because of that one bad experience, I thought maybe it wasn't for me. And so that's what I would change. If I could, I would tell her, this is important. You're going to need this because you are a leader. You can do this well. You just don't have the tools. And just how you're working really hard to make sure that database is up and it's secure, you should be working on how you lead, teaching yourself how you lead, practicing and things like that. That's what I would tell her. And I think that would have changed my trajectory just a little bit professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So in light of that, thinking about that then, because we, again, ultimately want to see more representation at that level, leadership level. So what would you say would be the skills we need to start to develop or to help the current generation develop so that they have the ability and capability to be leaders tomorrow? Because you need the skills to successfully be a leader. So what skills should you start to develop?
So one thing I notice in a lot of our like social media circles or like communities is a lot of like, get the tech skills, learn Linux.
The people skills are important.
Do SOC and whatever. And I'm sitting here like, y'all gonna need the other stuff. Exactly. You're gonna need to be able to communicate. Skills. The people skills you need. And I did an episode, and I want to give credit to a friend of mine, Bobby Kingsbury, because it was interviewing him that helped me come up with this terminology. And I call it the evolving technologist. And I say that we need to be bilingual. We have to speak business and we have to speak cybersecurity or technology. Because again, I said earlier, we need to be in the C-suite.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
You're not going to get there purely on technical. It's just not going to happen because they don't know what you're talking about.
True.
Femi, I've listened to techie people and I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying. And I've been doing this for 30 years.
I know.
So could you imagine the board of directors, those people, they don't speak that language. But I learned that because I moved from the implementation, right? The deep technical into program management, where you have to tell the story. The metrics have to say something. They have to mean something to the people, the regulator, the auditor. They don't know our language. And so that's what I would say needs to be added. And it needs to start early. Because it takes time to develop those skills and practice.
It does take time.
Yeah.
That's true. I find that our industry is the one industry, and I don't think there's any other industry that's as bad as us. We have way too many technical jargon and acronyms that if you're not in the space, you wouldn't understand. It's like speaking a completely different language, ABC, XYZ. Our certifications are all acronyms. Our products are all acronyms. Our technologies are acronyms.
Conferences are acronyms.
They're all acronyms, so you can't keep it all in your head. So we need to stop speaking technical speak and start speaking business speak. I think that's how I put it. I tell people, learn to speak business speak, but that's what we did. One final question. It's a very fun. I know we can do this all day if we had to.
I know we'd be here forever. We got to go though.
Yeah, but if there's one thing you could change about how we develop talent in cybersecurity, what would it be?
There is a discrepancy or a elitism that exists in our field, okay? And I don't know if this is the answer to developing talent. It probably is. But this is what came to my mind when you said it.
Okay.
And it's geared toward the more technical, right? I've seen it. It's happened to me. When I told someone I entered cyber as a program manager, they gave me a look like, really? Like you were, like I was less than. And it was so funny, Femi. The reason I can repeat this story to you is because of what I did after that happened. I said, well, I used to, but I said I started my career as a software engineer and a database administrator and blah, 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 trying to prove my technical chops to them. The people who do the program management, the compliance, the governance, they are just as important as the other folks. Because who is going to interpret the engineer?
Exactly. It's so important. We can't all be engineers or all be software.
Right.
The business wouldn't survive if that was the case.
That's why we have all of that. Remember, I just said the thing about the AI. We got to throw everything at that now. And the one big thing that I'm only just starting this course. The instructor said, AI is semantics. It's meaning. It's language. Technical stuff ain't
gonna do nothing. Yeah, true.
They are hacking it by talking to it.
Yeah, vibe coding their way through it. It's all a vibe.
They are prompting in English language, simple English language, and hacking AI. You don't need to know no zeros and ones, no Python, no JavaScript, no nothing.
No methods, no nothing.
So
no
thank
functions.
you, AI, for being the leveler, I guess. But here's the thing. It actually isn't even doing that. And I'm so sorry, Femi, because I know we said we were going to be done. This might be the last thing I'll say.
It's okay.
I I came across a role just today. It was some kind of AI something engineer something at like a local chamber of commerce. And I think the salary was maybe 160, 180, something. And I just was looking to see what other roles they had. And they had a director of IT. You know that
Okay.
person made less?
I am not surprised. I've actually seen that before. I've seen that before.
And
I was
so
looking
maybe AI is not a leveler after all.
It's true because again, there's a company I was looking at a couple of days ago. I won't mention the name because they're not paying me to promote their brand. They're in the apparel space, and I was looking at two different roles, and one was like a lead software engineer to develop around AI, and he made the range that they put out there. The starting pay was about $35,000 more, and the final pay was about $40,000 more than the manager of the governance team. It was a different open role, same company.
How's that gonna work?
So the manager and the leader, I'm like, so again, like I already said, AI might be it's not as much of a leveler.
Not yet, maybe.
As it's supposed to be, but it will get there. I think it will get there. Maybe when Skynet becomes a reality, but I don't think that's anytime soon. No Skynet.
Yeah.
But
so, in answer to your question, I think we need to not have that discrepancy between the types of the ways that you show up in the field. All of it's important.
True.
Yeah.
Everyone's important.
Because then it would allow people who come in to go to what they really want. I think a lot of people end up on the sock and then they don't like it, right? They hate it because it's not what they're geared toward.
Yeah.
But they want to make those six figures they were told about. You know what I'm saying? So
True. I completely agree. This has been a very fun conversation, Dawn. It's been way more fun than I thought it was going to be. So thank you for coming on. If my audience wanted to reach out to you, for example, or follow your work, where would be the best place to get you to find you?
So I'm most verbal on LinkedIn,
Okay.
and I am my name with some stuff behind
Some
it,
letters,
credentials behind it, alphabet soup. More to come, by the way. And in my podcast you mentioned earlier, Bites, Bits, and Brilliance. So actually, my podcast is where you will really find who I am. Okay. Because what I'm realizing is what I love about my podcast is it's mine. Exactly. I can say whatever I want on there, do whatever I want, right? So Bites, Bits, and Brilliance, it's on every single podcast app that's available. And like I said, LinkedIn. I should have a website, but I don't. I had it once, but I didn't like it, so I took it down. Yeah, the techie in me couldn't let it stay.
I had exactly the same feeling as well. So anyway, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a link to Dawn's LinkedIn in the description below. I'm also gonna put a link to the Spotify and the Apple podcast link for Dawn's podcast as well. Then you can go follow, see all the good things she does, listen to all her ideas, and she's some really nice ideas. Some of them are radical, but they're all really nice ideas.
I appreciate that, actually.
So they're all
appreciate you saying that.
But it is, again, I don't think we all can't be, the saying is we all can't be vanilla ice cream, because then it would be boring, right? So we've got to have some excitement, got to have some fun stuff. But on behalf of the audience, I want to say thank you so much, Dawn. It's been such an interesting episode talking to you today. And I'm hoping that even if one person has gotten something out of this has been so much worth it. So to the audience, again, go down, follow Dawn on LinkedIn, check out the podcast, the Bites, Bits, and Brilliance podcast. If you found this interesting, share this with someone we think might learn from this as well. And that one person in your network who's wondering what the difference is between sponsorship and mentorship, send this to them so they can know the difference. That one person who needs some motivation to get to the next level in their career, send this to them, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.